Donald Trump's defense starts its case in chief in New York City's civil fraud case brought by Tishy Latish James. And the first person back on the stand was Don Jr. We already saw that Tishy called him to testify as part of the government's case. But now that Trump is going, Don Jr. takes the stand. And we're going to go through it. We're going to take a look at the photograph of him seated in court when the media got their cameras out and went hog wild. We'll also hear from Alina Habba, jump right into the trial transcripts, courtesy of Inner City Press and Klasfeld Reports. But before we jump into the activities, Alina Habba was out over the weekend, and she was explaining a little bit about what happened previously. Of course, she's been one of the attorneys there in the Trump case. We've been hearing from Judge Engoron. We've been seeing him literally gag the lawyers, and when the lawyers say, "Can we file a motion to object to your gag?" they say, "Don't do it, Chris." What the heck am I supposed to do, Judge? I'm a lawyer. I have a client, and they're sitting right over there. Hello, I have to do something. And so the question is, how far can this thing go? Justice in America now? Like, is this the new standard? Or what is the defense going to do now that we get some of this stuff under the belt? And remember, we got to get some stuff under the belt before you can complain about it. You can really make the case in court, but it's going to hit an apex, and then they'll be able to file this, take it to the appeals. We're seeing judicial complaints be filed. Elise Stefanik filed one as a citizen of New York, and so the pressure is starting to cook a little bit. Here's what Alina says.
You have been complaining about the judge's clerk, and you say that the judge is compromised and the clerk appears compromised. Tell me why.
Well, I actually can't tell you why, because I'm gagged.
Right.
I can tell you that, we'll be filing papers to address all of those issues. And the fact that, frankly, Maria, I can't even discuss it with you, and I'm his spokeswoman, I'm his attorney, says a lot about what the judicial system, the state of our judicial system right now.
I think I did see that there were donations that the clerk had given, very supportive to the Democrats. That was one issue. Are you going to file to get a mistrial?
Yes.
When will you do that? Today?
Soon.
Yeah.
Very soon.
Okay.
Okay, so a mistrial's coming down the pike. We also know that there's some gag order problems that they're going to have to be battling around, and so she's being very careful there about what she can say because she's been gagged, because Judge Engoron doesn't want any of the lawyers commenting about his little love notes with his Greenfield, his law clerk, sitting right next to him. He's like, I don't know if she's massaging him or what's going on, because the lawyers can't really talk about it. And, we know the media wouldn't report on it, so I don't know what's going on there, underneath that desk or whatever's happening. So anyways, here's Don Jr. in court. Of course, when the trial starts, they let in all the media come out in the front, and, here he is sitting there just like, all right, here we go again.
The fact that the Trump sons, the Trump organization, did not try to have this conspiracy to defraud banks and insurers to get special rates on their properties by inflating those financial statements. Now, if you remember, Don Jr. was on the stand as a state's witness just about 2 weeks ago. And he distanced himself from...
Look at her. Oh, man. It's every day. She's sitting there, literally behind the bar. She's like observing, like with these other people. She should start tweeting like a live tweet thread or something about this. She is the New York State Attorney General, okay? She's one of the most powerful people in the whole state. And she is sitting here behind the bar, not doing anything all day for weeks, just sitting here and observing, like a law school student. It's incredible. Now, I don't know, like literally, I don't think she's doing anything. She's seated at the same spot. The cushions are now into the tish. And it's just like, oh gosh, they're gonna have to replace the whole bench.
Being, one of the top heads of Trump organization and preparing those financial statements. So when he takes the stand for the defense.
All right, so there's Tish, not doing much of anything. All right. Anyways, the other lawyers who were actually doing things, they were there. And so let's jump right into the trial. We'll get started and warmed up here with Adam Klasfeld, who is there reporting. He reports over for the Messenger, and he says, "Good morning. We're in New York." He says, Don Jr. slated to return to the stand, and we already know some backstory on him. He says the government lawyers entered the courtroom. Don Jr. went into the building, protesters shouting at him. Now Don Jr. enters the courtroom, and testimony begins. He swears him in. They call, Your Honor, the defense calls Don Jr. And this is Cliff Robert, who's, brings him up. Don Jr. goes in, promise to tell the truth, told the truth, but God? Yes, I do. All right, very good. Please proceed. So he goes in. All right. And he says, Mr. Trump Jr., good morning. And he says, good morning. I want to ask you a little bit about your education. He says, well, I'm very smart, a lot of education. I want to ask about some other areas in your life and kind of where you went in the early part of your life. He says, well, when I was a younger man, I moved to Colorado. I was working as a bartender there. I was actually there for about 18 months. Loved it. Beautiful town. And I enjoyed being a bartender. But then, after the 9/11 attacks happened, something happened, and I decided I was inspired. I wanted to go over and join the Trump organization. And so we pick up here with Don Jr., and we have some other conversation. He says, so Don Jr. rattles up some properties. He says, okay, so then you went to work for the Trump organization. And when you worked for the Trump organization, tell me some of the work that you did. Well, gosh, the Trump organization is a big deal. We did a lot of things. I worked on several real estate projects, for example. Trump Park Avenue is one. Trump Trump Tower Chicago was another one. Trump Las Vegas. Man, I was all over the place. We were busy. Some people saw incredible value in the Trump brand, and they just wanted to set us up all over the place. And he says, well, tell us about how things would work, Mr. Trump, when you're there with your family. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts. How did it kind of work? He says, well, the modus operandi there, the way that we kind of did things with my siblings and so on, he said, well, I think it was more of a meritocracy than title. Like, yes, our last name was Trump, but it was really a meritocracy. Like, my dad didn't want people playing around with this stuff. And just because we had a Trump name doesn't mean it's given to us. We got to work hard for it. And he says, well, tell me about, what your position was. He says this, and tell me about your siblings' positions. And they say, Eric Trump and Don Jr. and Ivanka Trump, they served as executive VPs for the Trump Organization. What was it like sharing executive vice president positions with your siblings, Mr. Trump? He said, well, we work collectively. You know how it is with the siblings, younger brother's a little punk. But anyways, we worked collectively, but each of us had our own sort of projects, and so we made it happen. Now, I want to ask you, Mr. Trump, about these questions you got about being a co-trustee of Donald J. Trump's revocable trust and the company that holds the ex-president's assets. You're familiar with this? He says, yeah, of course. He says the other co-trustee was Alan Weisselberg, and technically his title was business trustee. Is that true? And he says, well, yeah, here's how it worked. At the Trump Organization, there were various buckets, a lot of different things that we were working around. Business development, hotels development, golf courses. We had a licensing entity, all sorts of stuff, a lot of stuff. Okay, thank you for that. Well, I want to show you a document. Here, put on your screen here, it's labeled The Trump Story. Are you familiar with this, Mr. Trump? Objection! Colleen Faherty stands up. Yeah. Objection is what she says. And she says, Your Honor, I haven't seen this document before, and I don't know what is going on here. She says, I object to this sense of this narrative that we're getting. Like, what the heck are they talking about? It's untethered to anything that's even relevant. And it says, I want to note the contrast here, Judge, just for your honor. When Trump was here, when Trump Jr. was here, and we were asking him questions, his memory was, quote, fleeting at the time, okay? He couldn't answer anything. And now he's on the stand, and it seems like he's pretty capable of remembering anything. Don't you agree with me, Judge? Colleen, typical. So Judge Engoron says, pipe down, okay, over there. Colleen, relax, Faherty. I'm letting this document in, okay? I'll look like an idiot if I don't let this document in. I let all your documents in. I got to at least let them have one. Says, well, I think Mr. Robert eloquently explained why this is relevant, in terms of the big picture. This is Judge Engoron. And he's giving the side eye to, Greenfield. He's like, you like that, baby? What do you think of that answer? Doing good this morning. Happy Monday. So he says, the document says on the screen, thank you, finally. Okay, here it is. Mr. Trump, it says, do you agree here? It says, for more than 4 decades, the Trump Organization has set new standards of excellence as it has expanded its interest in world-class hotels, luxury real estate, top-tier buildings, championship golf clubs, merchandise, entertainment, and event management. You see that? Yeah, I do. He says, well, my grandfather, actually, he came out as the Horatio Alger story, which is, typically a phrase, Don Jr. says, which is used to illustrate rags to riches, the old pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of ethos. And the government, Andrew, he says, Your Honor, since we've gone back to the early 1900s, is there a waiver of the statute of limitations? And all the morons in the courtroom, yeah, funny joke there, bureaucrat, So basically, remember that the defense is objecting over every time that they introduce actual evidence in 2011 because it's actually in violation of the statute of limitations, and they just keep overruling that. They don't care at all about the actual statute of limitations. So then you get Gooberface here, who is now going to be joking about statute of limitations while they literally violate the statute of limitations because Don Jr. is going back to the 1900s and referencing some old story. He's saying they waived statute of limitations, and the judge is just laughing about it. All right, so you get what's happening here. It's just kind of a joke. So the defense then, they say, all right, are you done laughing over there, morons? All right, so let me show you this slideshow of Fred and Donald Trump, and there's glossy PR photos of company properties, this beautiful slideshow of all the properties. Probably really fancy, right? This is kind of their pitch deck. Think of it, right? It's a beautiful pitch deck of all the things. And the government is like, objection, that looks really good. He says, Your Honor, why is this relevant? Why are they showing us their slide deck? The judge says, well, why don't you pipe down over there, okay? You guys presented your case for 6 weeks. And the defense has time to mount their own case. So can you please stop objecting every 2 seconds? Judge Engoron's even like, gosh, this is ridiculous, which is wild. And I don't know what his Greenfield is thinking about this, but maybe maybe he's kind of feeling independent today or something. But Engoron stated that you guys have been going for 6 weeks. Can you let them ask 2 questions for crying out loud? Don Jr.'s up on the stand. He says, Your Honor, I promise I'll keep it under 6 weeks. They all laugh because it's actually funny. Now, Adams says, it continues on. Adams is the government. He says, so Engoron, Riley says, objection overruled. Go ahead. Talk about how great the Trump Organization was. It's a clown show. Well, I'll let you just talk. Go ahead and talk about how great Trump is. I don't care. I'm not listening to anything anyways. So it's like government, just sit down. You know, I've already made my decision. You don't need to object. I'm not listening. I don't care. So then they go through the slide deck, right? The pitch deck. They put the glossy slideshows on. From a room inside the plaza overlooking Central Park, looks beautiful. Don Jr. on Mar-a-Lago. He says, my father purchased that when it was one of the finest estates anywhere in the world. He likens it to like a castle. It's the finest estate, one of any in the entire world. And he gives us an overview of Mar-a-Lago. He says, you know, it was built for Marjorie Meriwether Post, one of the first female industrialists anywhere in America. She entertained titans of industry, leaders from all over the world. And there's a photograph of Mar-a-Lago's majestic and cavernous atrium. It's displayed on the screen. Like, look at that, he says. You can't build that today. He's like, literally, you can't build that today. Like, that is not buildable. It doesn't exist. He says, you know, they keep talking about $18 million appraisal. He says, you couldn't build that atrium for $18 million today. Now, the judge never appraised Mar-a-Lago at 18, says Adam. Now, displayed on the slideshow, a photograph of not yet President Trump is at the ribbon. He's cutting the ice rink in Central Park. Incredible. Dude's like a legend, right, in New York. He says, well, yeah, the Seven Springs Mansion was there in Westchester, New York. Yeah, I brought my kids there. He says his father isn't literally an artist with real estate. He sees things that other people don't. He says that is his canvas where he creates, and he's a creative guy. So they walk us through the chronology of the Trump Organization. They pull us back to 1995. They show this beautiful picture, 40 Wall Street. Slideshow displays the lobby, ex-Federal Reserve vaults, Trump family lawyer, moved into the tower. Don says, this is amazing. He says, this is a hotel condominium has never been done in luxury. Never been done. Engoron says, all right, look, we got 5 minutes before our first break, all right? It's driving me nuts here, talking all this goodness about Trump. These buildings look really impressive. But anyways, you know, I might call it a 10-minute warning because the witness talked so long, talking to Don Jr. Will you just quit yapping? And Trump's lawyer jumps back up, and Cliff Roberts says, hang on, Judge, don't you beat up my witness here. He doesn't talk nearly as long as other witnesses, and maybe referring to Trump. And Engoron says, well, that I'll buy. And Don Jr. says, well, I only got half the genes, so I only talk half as long as Dad. Then they take a break. And that's because they changed questions. All right, and so then at some point, Don Jr. came out and actually made a statement during one of the breaks. And let's see if I have this one queued up. And right here I do. So this is during one of the breaks. Don Jr. comes out, makes a statement to the media. Here is what it sounded like with Alina Habba in the background.
Very large banks get paid back millions of dollars. There's no complaint from them, but an overzealous attorney general decides to try to break up a transaction. And the implications for future fraud, if perhaps they don't donate to her political campaign, for any businesses operating in and around New York, are truly staggering, but that shouldn't surprise anyone based on everything that we've seen coming out of this attorney general, her statements both before having any knowledge, while running, and today. It's just a really sad state of affairs for New York. And again, where there is no actual person complaining other than the attorney general herself. It sets a precedent. Are insurance companies going to start suing hospital patients for listening to their doctors? Are they going to go after any transaction that doesn't contribute to their political campaigns? I would think that this would set a precedent to make it impossible for anyone to actually do business in or around New York City. But based on everything else I see in New York these days, it doesn't seem like they care. Hopefully one day the people of this great city will realize what's going on. They'll realize the destructive practices here. They'll realize just how insane that is. And they'll be begging for guys like Donald Trump to come back to New York City to reshape the skyline as he's done for decades.
Any comment about your answer?
Yeah, obviously a little bit
all
of
right, you're listening.
Still going to do with this stuff. So you got to keep doing it. That's the nature of all of this. But no, it's a rough day for myself and my family. I'm very close with actually her grandson, and it's a day, but at this age in our lives, it's just another day.
Will you be back tomorrow?
All right, so that is Don Jr. responding to not only the proceedings in court, but also to the death of Trump family member Aunt Marianne, passed away. And of course, we pray for her family and may she rest in peace. But that is what he's having to deal with, right? The family is under attack. There's no pause for any sense of decency in any of this stuff. And so their break was completed and they turned back. Now, morning recess is back and we're back. Donald Trump Jr. is on the stand. They say, tell us about what some of the things your father did in Florida. And he's, well, my dad's incredible. I mean, his vision was huge. He transformed the swampland in Florida into a golf course. And they now talk about Trump Tower and some other things, and it continues. Now, we jump over at Inner City Press, and we fast forward when father became president. And here is what it says. Don Jr. is on the stand. He says, I want to ask you about the transition, right? We know all about your role in the Trump Organization, but tell us about the transition into the presidency. Well, my father became president. We dropped our international licensing. Probably a big mistake, though. People said we were still doing it, even though we dropped it. And we did it because, we didn't want a conflict of interest, and so we dropped the licensing, but people didn't care. They said, you're still licensing, and we got screwed anyway, so maybe we should have just kept done it. But we protected the projects that were underway, and so we did what we did. Now, how would you describe the structure of that now, of those different projects? How were those situated? He says, well, my brother and I would be in charge of it, and we ran it. Eric and I. That's it. Mr. Trump Jr., who is Mr. Weisselberg? Oh, Mr. Weisselberg, of course, we know him as the CFO for the Trump Organization. He was also prosecuted and convicted. Said he was with us for 50 years, man. He was our CFO for a long time. Very great guy. Until 2021. And Mr. Trump Jr., how was your relationship with Mr. Weisselberg throughout 2017? Oh, gosh, very positive. I mean, great guy. He was our accounting guy. Him, along with Mazars, loved those guys, went golfing all the time. Dude has a, great putting game, blah, blah, blah. And Engoron says, can you slow down, Mr. Trump Jr.? Please speak more slowly. And he says, yeah, sure. Happy to speak more slowly. I'd say I'm pleased to be here, except the Attorney General might sue me for perjury. Looks right at Tish. I'd say I'm pleased to be here, except Tishy might sue me for perjury. Smiles. Tishy's like, yeah. Alina Habba says, Your Honor, can we pause for a moment? My audio equipment is not working. And Engoron says, I don't care. Everything is relative. Right, can you hear him now? Proceed. I don't care about your audio, Alina. She's like, what the heck, Judge? So they say, Mr. Trump, can you tell me about kind of the general services overview that you do at Trump Org? He says, well, we tend to be a full service type of organization. We own the project and we respond to the problems to keep our brand. We're totally vertically integrated. We don't like to outsource, blah, 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 blah. And the government jumps back up and says, objection, Your Honor. We don't think it's appropriate for him to be comparing himself to other businesses, and also lack of foundation. And what the heck is he talking about any of this for anyways? And Engoron says, yeah, that's the word I was looking for, foundation. I don't know what the heck you're talking about. So Trump's defense says, okay, we're moving on anyways. Mr. Trump Jr., tell me about how you would engage with other people who wanted to work with your organization. Well, Trump brand's a big brand. A lot of people want to work with us, and Trump was able to create this brand, and so other developers came to him. So they would, just be pounding the door down. Can you please put your name on our building and bring people over here? And so he would brand their projects for fees, and fairly significant fees actually, in order to get this stuff done. And they say, well, let's lay a foundation here so Judge Engoron doesn't flip out on us. What is a development, Mr. Trump? So they're going to lay some real serious foundation here. What is a development? Can you explain what a building is, Mr. Trump? Are there big trucks that go vroom vroom that build the steel girders? Oh, beep, boop, beep, boop, Oh, okay. You got it, Judge? Okay, is that enough foundation for you, idiot? Excuse me. All right. So a Trump lawyer says, let's lay a foundation. What is a development? He says, building or buying or making changes. That's what we do. And let me give an example. He says, take Dubai, for example. They didn't really have a luxury market until 2006. They weren't doing anything there, but my father was a visionary. Well, what's the difference in risk between building something and licensing something? Is there a difference in risk? He says, yeah, there's a lot more risk in building something, even in licensing, right? There's brand risk, but in building something, like if the project goes bad, there's a different thing. There's a brand risk other than a building risk because you've got the brand and whatever. So they say, I want to put this back on the screen. It's called the Trump story. And they put it up on the screen. Government, objection. Your Honor, these narratives are unfocused. And this quote, Trump story, whatever they have here on this pitch deck, it's hearsay. And they say, Judge, this Attorney General Tish over there warming up the chair is trying to put the company out of business, okay? Our witnesses are going to go for weeks. We're not going to just be done here. Are you kidding me? We're just getting started. So if they're objecting to us every 2 seconds, this is going to be a long trial. And the government says, Your Honor, this is ridiculous, okay? First of all, this witness is dishonest. Last week, his memory seemed to be fleeting. Now, this document is being used to guide him. And now they're showing it on the screen. He's walking, and the lawyer says, it's all photographs, Trump's defense. We thought of asking to do a site visit. You want to come and go look at it? But we thought that would be a little bit aggressive, unless you want to go to Scotland over there. Don Jr. says, yeah, maybe when it's a little bit warmer, okay? It's a little cold right now. Government's like, a party does not get to put its website on trial as an ad, okay? And the Trump lawyer says, I'm trying to move it along. If you'd stop objecting, for crying out loud, I got like 2 slides left. Sit down and relax. And she says, well, it doesn't come into evidence. I don't want those photographs coming into evidence. And Trump's defense says, well, so photos are evidence though. The rest doesn't come in. That's fine, but I want the photos to come in. And Judge Engoron says, yes, that's my ruling. Photos come in, all of the language doesn't come in. How about that? And the lawyer, not happy. So Trump lawyer says, okay, look, Mr. Trump Jr., I want to talk about the history of the Trump Organization. He says, oh, I'd love to. My great-grandfather developed hotels in the Yukon for miners. My grandfather started working on job sites in Queens. He was asked to build a garage and, he ended up building a portfolio of apartments. Kind of crazy story. But my father father then took into Manhattan from Queens, and he literally changed the skylines. Government chimes back in again. Says, if we're in the 1900s, what about the statute of limitations? Laughter again. It's like, you already tried that joke. Hello. Get a new line. They're so uncreative, these government bureaucrats. You literally did that like before the break. We didn't forget, okay? It's written in the tweet thread. You already tried that. Stupid statute of limitations joke, but they did it again. Okay. So they put up the photo. Who's in this photo, Don Jr.? He says, my grandfather and my dad. From that hair, definitely before my birth though. And what is this building? He says, well, that's the Grand Hyatt. You know, it was a big job. Back in 1976, the government chimes in. Is he an expert in 1976 New York City, Judge? And Judge says he's putting on expert testimony. It sounds like he's trying to talk like an expert, but Mr. Trump's defense, but I gave you 6 weeks. And so Mr. Keese is going to talk about how I rule against them. And so I find this interesting. And so I guess I'll just let it go. Wild, right? I gave you 6 weeks. And if I rule against him, then Keese is going to talk about how I rule against them. And I find this interesting. So I guess I'll just let it go. Defense says, Your Honor, I'll keep it less than 6 weeks. We're not going to be here that long. Don Jr. says, I'll keep it less than 6 weeks. And so we continue on. Then there was Trump Tower. We got the Tiffany's air rights. Okay. It took other decades to figure out how to do it. My father maximized the far floor area ratio since I was 5 years old, but it seemed like this was pretty amazing. Other developers later told me what we did was unprecedented. Objection again. Hearsay as to what other developers told him. Okay, sustained. No other developers can come in on this. Don Jr., what is this? Another thing on the screen. The retail. It's genius. This was the West Side Rail Yards. It was an eyesore. He was going to build the tallest residential building as he later did from the UN, but the project changed. This project took 25 years. Another image. What's this? This is one of the lobbies where we were surrounded in that area by aging coops. This was new. My father was at the leading edge, putting gyms and amenities and otherwise saleable space. Now tell me about Mar-a-Lago. What about this atrium? Yeah, okay, so we do have a little bit more detail. So now we're at the atrium again. So we're sort of getting to the atrium from where we were with Klasfeld. So the joke was the same in both transcripts. So what about the atrium? It says, I took some umbrage for saying it, but you couldn't build an atrium for 18 million bucks. And this ballroom, it was built in the early 2000s for 15 million. And what about Central Park Rink? My father fixed it as our first City Works project. And what about the Plaza Hotel? My father took it over and then sold it again. How about Seven Springs? We're going to hear from Eric, your brother, later, but he says, my father's an artist. Do you sometimes leave some space? He says, yeah, every project and market is different. And at one time, 40 Wall Street was one of the tallest buildings in the world. Now, Judge Engoron jumps in here. He says, you're using a banned word in my courtroom. Again, don't say it again. And try not to be so repetitive, says the judge. Don Jr.'s like, well, relax. He says, the Fed used to build to store gold, used the building to store gold. And again, we get another 5-minute warning. That's the same 5-minute warning. We're comparing transcripts now, just to be clear about that. They talk about some golf course stuff, and then they talk about Derek Jeter living at Trump Tower for a certain period of time. They're going through their properties, right? One at a time. International Golf Links, similar, property here's very unique. Next property, Trump Golf Links at Ferry Point in the Bronx. Jack Nicklaus designed that course. The defense rolls tape on a promo video of the property. State objects again. Engoron says, okay, we'll let that in the background. Here's another one. Trump International Hotel. Incredible property on Pennsylvania Avenue. It was converted from the old post office. DC Hotel. It's sort of a great example of a public-private partnership. Asked about the company's future plans, Don Jr. wraps up his testimony pretty quickly. Says, well, it depends on whether we're soon into oblivion in the foreseeable future. I don't know if we're going to survive. That's up to these government bureaucrats. So direct examination ends on that note. Now, the state is up for cross-examination. Colleen's back up, Colleen Faherty. And she says, isn't it true, Eric, the Waikiki Hotel is ditching the Trump brand? He's like, oh, I don't know, or whatever. And the questioning's brief. That's it. No further questions from her. There's no redirect. Don Jr.'s testimony ends. And so that is pretty quick. That's why it ended so quickly on the other thread. Not much happening there, right? That's the end of Don Jr. Next witness up, Trump's lawyer calls Sherry Dillon. She's the next witness for the state. And she was already somebody who testified for the government as well. Judge Engoron says, hey, welcome back, Sherry. Feels like we're at a reunion again. Sherry, you promise to tell the truth, but yes, I do. Already been here before. Put her back on the stand. All right. They say, Miss Dillon, can you tell us about the purpose of some of these conservation easements here? Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, this has been something that comes up a lot. And this has been an issue at the Seven Springs property in Trump, LA. Here's what happens is there's an appraisal, and the appraisal doesn't really take into the account the renown of the seller, right? So like they're just looking at property. And so think about it like this, like it would treat a property with Taylor Swift as the owner no differently than one that I own, right? Like there's clearly a difference. Like somebody says, I bought this mansion because Elton John used to live here or something, right? right? Like, you know, those people. It's like Elton John. So like, okay, great. You know, what does that mean to you? Can you play the piano now? No. All right. So, you know, same type of thing here, you know, but it does add value to it. Like, it actually adds value. Okay. It's Elton John's home for whatever reason. Taylor Swift's home. Donald Trump's home. It's like, yeah. So it's this type of appraisal that doesn't take into account that. And Engoron says every case has to have Taylor Swift in it somehow. It's like, good gosh, everywhere. Now even all the football moms are into her now. Great. So Klasfeld says, reporting from Klasfeld Reports, says, so the defense is now showing Sherry Dillon an email exchange. Miss Dillon, do you recognize this? Government objects. We don't want that coming in. Says, Your Honor, they can't use the objection over the email as a shield for them and then a sword against the state. So in other words, when the government tried to get it in, Trump's defense objected and kept it out. But now they're trying to get it in. And they're saying they can't use it to keep out, but then also to use as a sword. They take a break and we're back. And they say Dillon is back on the stand. And she's still looking at emails. You recognize this? Yeah. This one comes from the Briarcliff approval. She looks at the document. Cushman Wakefield. They did the appraisal on the property. And they say, are these accurate? Does it look all good? Yeah, it is. No further questions. Sounds good. Do you approve it? Yeah, this is how it works. Yeah, great. Okay. No further questions. Government comes up. Miss Dillon, are you admitted to practice law in New York? No. Have you ever been admitted to practice law in New York? No. Couple more questions. And that's the testimony. No further questions, Your Honor. Any redirect? No. That's it. Testimony's over. All right. And so parties wrap on the day, scheduling matters, and that is it. And so, you know, semi-interesting trial day here. Thank you to Inner City Press and Klasfeld Reports for bringing us the reporting. Don Jr., of course, in the courtroom, explaining much of what we'd expect. Not much is going on here, right? This is just a regular business doing regular business things, not actually that interesting. What does make it interesting is the corrupt prosecutor, Tishy Latish, and her civil fraud prosecutors who are bringing in this case to strip Trump of $250 million and trying to destroy his business. And that the two elected people, Judge Engoron, elected Democrat, and Tishy Latish James, elected Democrat, both have a history of not liking Trump, and they're the ones running this circus show. So, my friends, we'll be here continuing to cover. Trump's trial is still going on. His case in chief from the defense is just getting started. Hope you join us as we continue to unpack everything that's happening here. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for checking out robertgovea.com to sign up for our daily newsletter, to get all the show reports, to access the mind map and more. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.